as people are reading, there's this, I know, there's this book called White Fragility, la la la, everyone needs to read it, it's really great. What were we talking about?
Oh, what we're looking forward to in 2019, and it just kind of
went into
yeah,
a
that's
thing.
fine.
I want to see Hadestown.
I want to see Damon Donnell and Chaps again. That was nice.
Oh my god, and I want to see Gary, obviously.
Oh yeah.
And Glenda Jackson in King Lear. Can I tell you, I have like the best Glenda Jackson story at the Drama Desk Awards last year. I went up to Glenda Jackson, and that was weird in general because like the day before the Drama Desk Awards was like the post-premiere party, and I went and I got roofied, and I like woke up in my bed covered in like vomit, and I had no recollection of how I got there, and I looked at my watch and I was like, oh my god, I've got 3 hours before the Drama Desk Awards. So I like
Were you okay?
wiped off, I don't remember any of it, so I don't feel traumatized, but I like wiped off all the vomit, and I like threw on some eyeshadow and put on like a sparkly gown, and I went to the Drama Desk Awards, and all of a sudden I was like taking photos of like Bernadette Peters and Laurie Metcalf, and I went up to Glenda Jackson, I was like, oh my god, Glenda Jackson, I loved you so much in Three Tall Women, and she was like, really? And she was like, thank you, I'm gonna go outside now and smoke a fag. And I was like, I'm right here. I really want to see her in Lear.
What are you looking forward to?
I think I said Damon Donnell and Chaps is back. I think so.
Because this would be like the third year, I guess, that Oklahoma would be like, a show that we could include on our list, right?
Yeah. And the thing, I mean, if we're talking about reinvention, we should like reinvention of classics, reinvention of who gets to occupy these spaces. Because what I love most about that Oklahoma was like, it was yes diverse, but also Ali Stogo was in it, and they didn't have to talk about that her character had a wheelchair because that's just part of the world, and it reorchestrated that iconic score so it made it sound like a contemporary score, which isn't a thing that happens very often in contemporary musical theater or mainstream musical theater. Would you all say?
That scores get reorchestrated?
Oh no, that musical theater composers are. That's what I loved about K-pop was like it sounded like they looked like what's on the radio, and Hamilton sounds like what's on the radio.
Yeah. Well, that used to be the norm.
Yeah.
That was the norm up until like the 60s. And then I think what started happening is you frequently had more theater creators whose central reference point was other theater creators. And you started getting like a snake eating its tail kind of a thing. And the creators of theater were no longer actually riffing on popular culture or of popular culture. It just started becoming this bubble. And that actually I think is a major problem of relevancy for the art form. But yeah, I mean, when Oklahoma was first created, like those people, like they were the rock stars of their era, 100%. Which is so funny because now we look at like Oklahoma as being milquetoast, but it actually was incredibly radical when it was created. And that's what I mean. Like we should all write the Oklahoma of our era. And when I say that, I mean like not 90% of what's coming out of BMI, but what captures that spirit of radical change in theater. Because I think when Oklahoma happened, people were fucking pissed. Like that first performance, like people were like screaming at the stage, like for things that seem like so not interesting now. Like just the fact that people were using song to explore their emotions. People are like, what? This is not a Cole Porter song? What's going on?
It's so dark, it's not happy, someone dies!
Yeah. And so now, I don't know if like the modern day equivalent of that is like snuff pornography on stage, but we should do it.
And I think when you were talking about reinvention, like it makes me think that it's like I'm really attracted to when people really lean into themselves, and I don't mean like the carbon copy of what they think themselves should be, and I don't mean like historically what has been in the past, and I don't mean like here's the version of what is going to sell, but really, really deeply like down into your ancestry roots, and I think, you're a pro at this, like you just lean so hard into yourself, and like there's a lot of liberation in that kind of authenticity, and I'm really excited for that. And I'm tired because I slept over at the theater last night, so if I do anything, it's in mindset.
I feel like I should have gotten you coffee. I'm sorry.
It's amazing.
forward to, Jose?
Well, whatever's happening next door, I guess. Sounds like fun. I've been saying this since the election in 2016, and I'm not kidding. And like every time I get sick, that I've been sick during the past like 2 years, even right now when I'm recovering from a sinus infection, I pray every morning, and I'm just like, please let me live just enough time to get to see Kelly O'Hara and Kiss Me Kate. That's all I want. I can die to death after I go see that. So, do you know if Kelly's here? No. Okay, well, if she ever listens to this, like, I'm staying alive for you, Kelly. So thank you. And Max and Diana, like, I love that the two of you do so much with the audience. And I don't want to say like audience participation because that's kind of like corny. But for instance, like I was at your show, Diana, last night, and it's
Party, it's a party.
It's a party. Sorry,
I brought food.
Yeah.
You brought food, yeah. And
Oh, I brought empanadas. Ooh, a vegan. Yeah, I'm sorry, you missed a vegan empanadas. I'm sorry. Okay.
but do you remember when like was the first time that you were like maybe like sitting at a show and you were just like dying to like jump on stage and you were like just sitting here in the dark, just watching this bullshit. Like I want to be a part of it, and then I want people who come to my parties and shows to be a part of the experience also.
What was the question?
Do you remember if there was like any like specific instance when you were growing up, maybe
Like
when you were sitting
the,
down?
when my friend took me and a bandmate and my bandmate's mother to go see The Color Purple, and it was like the second they started singing and everybody came up on stage, tears already on my feet and crying, and that was it. And it was like I couldn't be further away and I needed to be closer. I remember that being a really powerful moment. You know, anytime I go see a concert, you know, something that my friends teach me all the time is that like it's all theater and it's all performance and it's all around us and we're doing, I mean, this is theater. Like we just put on a 4-person show. It's happening right now, you know, and
That's why it's terrifying.
Can we win a Tony for this then?
yeah. You know, it's like when I go see like concerts, that does for me. Who? I mean, is Hendrix? Who's the person who was in residency before you? Nona Hendrix. Yeah. When I went to one of her nights, and then it was, you know, it was just wild and awesome, and Max does it to you. Like it just makes you wanna. It just. How do you not feel an energy there?
I don't know. I think something that maybe exploded my idea of wanting to actually participate or be on stage, even though I grew up seeing so much theater, I never really had that impulse. And then I think it was about 10 years ago now, the original, before it transferred to Broadway, Diane Paulus revival of Hair that was in the park, in Central Park. And it was like only 2 weeks into the run. It was extremely hard to get, so I had to actually sleep over in a sleeping bag overnight in Central Park. Like literally on the ground. So that was like the only way I can survive this is just to get extremely high. And so I was like very stoned out of my mind for like 24 hours straight by the time I actually made it into the theater to see the show. But then it felt so right because I was super high and these characters were like pretending to be high, smoking their little cigarettes, and we were all in like Central Park. And then at the end of the show and I was feeling during the show because it's such a happening, and I was feeling like there wasn't that typical proscenium theater divide of like we're all in the dark and they're all there performing for us. Like it felt more immersive in that way, that we were a part, the way it was staged was that we were like a part of the tribe, which is something that did not carry over to the Broadway transfer. It did make me want to jump up on stage, so I was so thrilled when during Let the Sun Shine In, they were like, jump up on stage, and I was still high, and so I was like, yes! And so that was great.
And then the next experimental version of Hair, everyone gets naked.
Yeah.
In the audience.
Yeah.
Diana, I remember this blog post you wrote back in 2015 about how when you decided you want to be an actor, you wanted to be the next Meryl Streep. And realizing that oh, this industry isn't kind to anyone who isn't like a size 0 waif. What? And so like, how did the two of you like embrace like your own, I don't want to say weirdness because that's kind of pejorative, but like.
I self-identify as weird, so yeah, that's my pronoun.
But like, I'm gonna steal that. But how did you discover your own style and become comfortable with the fact that what I want to make is outside the traditional paradigm and it will not always be welcomed and I won't always get the money for it? How did you accept that and make a living from that?
I'll jump in. I'm nodding my head. I made you a Tony, so here. Tony! You're welcome.
It's everything is up to one.
I mean, yeah, so I was acting and auditioning and all those things and doing plays, and I remember I did a regional play, and I was like, that is the last time I act in a regional play. That is just not for, yeah, it's fine. And, there was just a lot of capital R racist things that happened, and I was done. I didn't have the patience for it. I was like, my light's too bright. I don't want to be a plug-and-play kind of artist, and at that point, there was just so much happening. Somehow it led me to the My Lingerie play installations of standing outside in my lingerie in Times Square with the signs, with all the reasons of why I was deciding to take a stand, and it was just this organic thing, and songwriting just kind of came really naturally, and so once that hit, once it was like, oh, this is as simple as like singing music to a room of people, I mean, that was it, and from there, I mean, there's also the longer version. There's like the real like here's exactly the step-by-step thing that happened in a very practical way, and like the gifts that were given to me and the opportunities that were given to me. But I remember it took, I was acting in a Rob Askins play that he had written for this theater company called Terra Nova Collective, and Terra Nova Collective isn't there anymore. But the artistic director, Jennifer Conley Darling, was like, we do these solo show festivals. Do you want to write a solo show? And I told her, like, I've never done that before in my life, and all I have are all these songs, and I hadn't ever played these songs out loud in the public before, which is all for my like private use for whatever reason. And she was like, okay, awesome, you have a month deadline. And then in 1 month, I did my first piece of solo work, and it was all music, and that was kind of my first segue into it, But it was something I never really, that's what I mean by it's just like this accidental drop-in, by just kind of being your open channel, by cooking like 10 different dishes, and you never know who's gonna want to eat it, but like you're cooking it because you love cooking. Great, yeah.
This is gonna sound really crazy, but so growing up I was extremely bullied. And so in middle school, I kind of embarked on this project. I don't think Amazon has this anymore, but like in the early days of Amazon, they had this thing called like Listomania, where like people could, before the algorithm existed, like people could make their own lists. So like if you like this, you would like these, 50 things. And I was like so attacked during school, and people were constantly harassing me for my identity, and I felt the only way to cope with that was to completely deaden myself inside. And so I would search lists on Amazon for like the most disturbing art of all time, so that I could like harden myself by seeing shit that was like so fucked up that like nothing would affect me anymore. But it kind of had the opposite effect, because the art that I was consuming on these lists at the age of like 13, 14 was like David Lynch and like weird Japanese art films, and then all of a sudden I was like listening to like Yoko Ono, and like, I don't know, I just got into really weird art, and that actually empowered me to let my freak flag fly, and I also now in retrospect feel like all that bullying uniquely prepared me for a career in the arts, because I've already experienced a lifetime of rejection and I didn't kill myself, so I kind of like don't give a fuck what these like 70-year-old gatekeepers think of me. And also all the people I idolize growing up with people like, you know, Lou Reed, David Bowie, and like those are all people that kind of like radically shook up the art forms that they were in. So that's always what I've aspired to. I've never wanted to seat the table. I've wanted to make my own table and invite the weirdos to sit with me at that, because like we're gonna have a better dinner party anyway. So yeah.
Better dressed dinner party.
Yes.
So what's like good tactics for building a thick skin?
I think rejection and surviving it, you know, I mean, I think, and throwing yourself out there constantly. I mean, there's that, you know, saying of like aim for 200 rejections a year or whatever, but and that's, you know, like all those kind of like truisms or sayings, I kind of like roll my eyes at, but there is a little bit of a grain of truth to that, of like when you've only had one rejection in your life, you feel like 100% of the pain of that, whereas when you've had two, maybe you feel 50% of the pain, and so on and so on and so on. I mean, it always sucks, you know. In this industry, we're constantly getting rejected, but the more you put yourself out there, I think the easier it is to shirk off the rejection, the more certain you are of your own ability. And I also think finding your community, like if you know, like I don't feel the pain of rejection anymore unless I feel like the audience that I'm creating, the work that I want to create for does not like my work. Like if I wrote The View Upstairs and like those like weird queer kids showing up to the theater with like glitter on their face hated my show, then I would feel deeply depressed. If like some like 60-year-old, you know, like white man whose favorite musical is I'm not reading you for saying Kiss Me Kate, even though you really want to say it. But if it is Kiss Me Kate, then I'm kind of like, you know what I mean? Like I don't care as much. But yeah, I think part of it is knowing who your community is and knowing who you're creating work for, and then it's easier to have a thicker skin.
I think it also brings up the question of like, what is your art healing and what is your art harming? You know, like is your art causing healing or harming, and who are you trying to heal? You know, because not every medicine is going to work for every person. If you have cancer, then I'm not going to give you cancer medicine. You know, not a doctor. So, you know, and you want to be a good doctor. You want to be, I mean, something that I've gotten really comfortable with 2019 is like, wow, artists, cool. Like we are really signing up to be superhuman, and I don't mean this in like that, like so superhuman. I mean that in like, our jobs are literally to observe and digest and like be extremely curious about the human condition and become superhuman in that way. And then in terms of like the thick skin stuff, I agree wholeheartedly about like surrounding yourself with the community that you want to be accountable to, and your collaborators, and like I cry so much with my collaborators, and they have seen me naked so much. And without those two things, it's like you're a shell of a person. Because yeah, it's like not everyone's gonna love you, and get really comfortable with not everybody loving you, and nor do you want that. We're afraid of each other sometimes, and that is okay. I used to grow up being like, I want everyone to love me, and it was like, you know what? It's all good.
Also, I think what's so important is, you know, even though I was just talking about rejection, I think it's really important to cultivate the memories of like good experiences in your head too. You know, like, you know, even if you have been spending 5 years trying to get your production, if along those 5 years you've had these moments, you know, in workshops or readings where you're seeing artists bring your work to life, and you have those moments of like deep joy of creation in a room, like taking those experiences and fashioning those into an armor that you can wear, and kind of insulate yourself a little bit from the rejection of being like, God, I'm in this like horrible moment right now, but I remember that feeling of joy, and I will be back there soon enough.
I think that's why glitter, I don't know if this is what it is for you, but I think that's why like the sparkle and like all this stuff, it's just, I don't know, for me it's It's like a light. It's like, let me turn my light on, you know?
Yeah, I will say I had to move out of my last apartment though because of glitter. Because when I was making all the costumes for my Joe's Pub show, I finally just got like tired of like going so meticulously with all the glitter, and then I just started spraying shit with like adhesive, and then just dumping buckets of glitter on top of it, and being like, I'll just sweep it up afterwards. But then like every time, 5% of the glitter would never leave the floor, and then after like about 2 months of doing that, it literally turned into a health hazard where it felt like I could, like when I was just walking through the apartment, I could see particles of glitter like floating through the air, and I was getting like coal, like the gay version of coal miner lung. I had to move the apartment.
But if you die from too much glitter, it's going to be so fabulous. So what did Carrie Fisher once say about, like, she died in moonlight strangled by her own bra? But with glitter.
I've always wanted to ask the two of you, like, if there's like, let's say like there's like maybe like a gazillionaire, maybe Jeff Bezos is feeling good about the arts and is hiding here somewhere, and he was to give you like, like here's all the money you want, and I want you to like grab like a classic play or musical and just like Diana and Max the fuck out of it. Like, what would you pick and what would it look like?
Sex education. Any book. I would just take our sex ed, I would take everyone's sex education.
Wait, are we saying if we had his money that we could do anything with it, or like specifically it has to be for adapting an old classic?
You have to adapt like a classic. And
I know, I was like,
I would take
by
the
Shakespeare?
like, yeah, I would take the text of whatever we're using in schools right now, whatever we're learning from, I want to adapt it into, I don't know, fireworks, strobe light, like song, vulva, penis, other body parts, breasts.
Well, first I would try to like get Jeff Bezos to give me his money to do something else other than adapt a classic. But if I absolutely could not convince him to do something more worthwhile with his money, I think what I would say is let's adapt Caucasian Chalk Circle, but make it about people arguing on social media. I don't know if you know Caucasian Chalk Circle. It's about like these two mothers, basically like a biological mother and a person who actually has raised this child, and they're arguing over who has the right of like true parentage over this child. And there's this like crazy ass judge at the end who draws up a circle, and they're like both grab onto one of the arms of this child, and whoever can pull the child into their end of the circle owns that child. And then the actual, the biological mother is like tugging at her child like she's gonna rip the child's arm off, but the woman who's raised this child actually lets go because she's the one who truly loves this child and therefore doesn't want to like hurt this child by pulling so hard and like ripping off this child's arm in a tug-of-war battle with this woman. And so the judge was like, you're the actual mother. So it was like, psych. But I think I've noticed so much in the past couple of years on every time I get onto social media, it feels like it's a Caucasian Chalk Circle over like who has the right to argue ownership over this ideology. And so I think there could be a really